Hello everyone, welcome to Winthrop in the World. I'm Paul Baskin, and with us today is our State Senator Lydia Edwards. Senator Edwards, thank you for coming on again for this.
Thank you for having me.
So a big issue in town, obviously, is the situation with immigration. The fact that the Trump administration is going around, by some accounts, arresting people for various reasons. Some don't seem to add up for why they're doing it. It's obviously there's some popularity in the idea of reducing illegal immigration in this country, but the question of how it's being done is a big one. We just had a case in Winthrop last few days of two people being arrested on the streets, but not a lot of detail as to what happened to them. I gather they were employees of a paint company, but maybe not a lot of details on what their status was. Wondering if maybe you might start by telling us what you know about that case and what generally you know about what's going on in town with this issue.
In that case, I know a lot, basically what other people know as well, which is that two men were working for a company and that they were basically arrested for being by ICE. So it was for being here maybe without documentation or permission, I'm not sure. And ultimately, when several people in Winthrop I saw on camera asked, do you have a warrant, so on and so forth, they didn't seem to have a warrant. I have checked with some of my immigration attorneys in the area. They are not representing these individuals. I'd love to help out any way I can. And by help out, I mean at least understand their circumstances, understand if they are in need of additional representation. I just so firmly believe in due process. I so firmly believe that everyone should be able to make their case for whatever reason. I believe in the court system, and I think so much about this immigration moment from the Trump administration is sloppy. It's meant to cause fear. It's meant to cause chaos. I mean, I recently talked about how the two men that were arrested were in Winthrop, but the woman who is a U.S. citizen, who is a Massachusetts resident, who is a constituent of mine and an immigration attorney who got the order to self-deport, lives in the North End. So it's been hitting a lot of my district, as well as the fact that in East Boston, we have the largest TPS population.
Temporary
protected status. So, and just so people understand what that means these individuals were vetted to come into the country. They have to check in, I think, every 18 months. When they check in, they have to prove they pay taxes, prove that they are employed, and prove that they have not committed any crimes. There are Americans that can't do that. And they, in many cases, have been here for 20, 30 years, and they're vital members of the economy and vital members of our community. And I just want to be very clear about that. So when the Trump administration says, we're just going to end that program, you're upending so much of our community, and for no reason, because I just told you they have to pay taxes, they have to pay, or they have to stay crime-free, and they have to check in. They have to stay employed.
So within Winthrop, there are people, it seems, in town that are horrified by what happened, and there are others who are applauding it seems like, who think that, well, there are too many immigrants in the United States. There's this talk that they, obviously from the president, that they commit disproportionate numbers of crimes. The data suggests otherwise, that they are living off of welfare. They've come here to do that. What's your answer to those people who say those kinds of things about this situation?
I would, for so many of them, I would ask them to seriously look at their own heritage. You know, so many of us come from immigrant backgrounds, and just to have some kind of empathy, sympathy. You don't know how or why someone came here, and you don't know if they came here fully vetted and their visa expired, that they ended up in a good job, or that they ended up in a situation where they couldn't go home. I would just encourage people, no matter what you feel about individuals and where they come from, to believe in due process. At least that. Believe in our Constitution and the fact that people have the right to make their case. No one should be just pulled off the street like that young woman was. And no one should be applauding that.
There's obviously, Winthrop has a growing Hispanic population. What do you understand the town, or what should be the town's response to people in that situation, to the Hispanic population of the town? Is it to just be quiet and hope for the best, or is there some kind of assurances that possibly could be given under the circumstances that are productive, or
I think the best response for any community is to say, we see you, you're a part of our community, we value you, and welcome. That's the best response you can have. If you don't want to get involved in the policies, if you don't want to get involved in the politics, just telling kids, come play, telling adults to come work, and just saying that you're welcome.
So there's a big issue, obviously, is the degree to which local law enforcement cooperates with this federal effort. I mean, the city of Boston, of course, has gotten some direct attention for what the mayor has said. What's your understanding of the situation here in Winthrop and within your district, which, as people may know, is into Revere in Boston?
Right.
What's your understanding of the degree to which the police in these towns are helping or not, or what? Are they in a tough bind themselves? I mean, what's your understanding of the law enforcement response locally here?
My understanding of the law enforcement response is that they're going after the criminals, and they don't care where they're from.
The
police will be going after the criminals. They do not care where you're from. They do not care what your immigration status is. They don't care about any sob stories. If you're committing crimes, if you are violent, they're coming for you, and that's a good thing. They are not involved in vetting who is here with or without documentation. And honestly, I personally don't think that they want to be involved in that, because it's got nothing to do with whether they're investigating you for a drug deal or not. They should be investigating you for the drug deal, regardless of your immigration status. Why pour something else onto them to vet the person for?
Right. We could go on a lot about that, but there's a lot of other issues going on. One is housing, which is something you've been working on a lot. It's been a big issue in town with 3A. Again, 3A is the MBTA Communities Act that requires some level of rezoning to get past single-family only situations in towns that have MBTA service. Can you maybe update on where things stand with that? I mean, Winthrop is, I mean, on a town level, which is not your area, is in, I gather, non-compliance still. Do you see a resolution to that coming? Does Winthrop stand to still lose state money because of that? Where things stand generally? My
understanding is that we kind of have preliminary compliance because we submitted, because of the plan that we had submitted, but that ultimately there will have to be some form of vote or adoption formally at the local level. I think by July is our deadline. So I'm hoping that we will be able to put this behind us and come up with a resolution. I can tell you I supported Tony Marino's excellent comments.
The town manager.
Town manager's comments and suggestions that we create a new category of housing in 3A that was for coastal communities that were on the coast and had limited land space. So you couldn't just require us to build as much as possible because we're limited. We also, on the other end, squeeze out by a massive industrial complex, the airport. And then there was also the very real concern, or real acknowledgement, I should say, that Winthrop has done its part. We are very dense. We have been building a lot without any demands from the state. So if you combined all of those things and we were meeting our 40B, we should be able to be seen as compliant. I support that. I supported that and sent it a similar letter. Unfortunately, that was not adopted, and I think it was very disappointing because I thought that was a wonderful compromise that would have helped meet our needs as well as states.
So who's not compromised? Is
the
the
state
governor?
Did not adopt those as suggested components in the regulations. So that was disappointing. So at this point, we will be. I understand locally it's back in Winthrop's hands as to whether they will adopt a new plan.
Right. Okay. Also, if the point of 3A is to expand housing and to put it near transit, would it make sense for just to maybe have the MBTA take a lot of the stations it has in the station space and the parking space and just build housing right at MBTA stations and therefore, sort of get two things at once?
I think it would be great. Housing, mixed use, putting more stores, putting more commercial activity. So when people get off of the train, they go upstairs or they go right behind them to a large grocery store that maybe has some apartments on top of it. I think concentrating it in an area where people are already concentrating is a good thing.
And is there any progress to that idea, or is that just sort of sitting there?
Well, I mean, there is some progress in the Affordable Housing Act. There was a large amount of money put in for state land and assessment of state land and properties. That assessment plus essentially streamlining the DCAM process where you decommission state properties. So in my district, but in the Boston side, the Hurley Lindemann building, which is I don't want to call it.
It's right near Government Center.
Unattractive building
between Mass General and the Government
yes,
Center.
And it's about 5-ish acres, and it's near the Edward M. Brooke Courthouse. They have streamlined that process so that it will be decommissioned. It's considered surplus, and now it will become mixed-use housing.
Yeah.
And so the public comment period, I think, is in June. But that's an exciting thing to see.
Sure.
It attracts investors. It's cheaper for people to invest and build.
Also on housing, you just publicly celebrated the law that the signing of a law, right, that you were the mover behind, which is to let Massachusetts tenants seal their past eviction records.
Correct.
Would you maybe talk about that and why that was an important thing to do?
Sure. And I want to be very clear. First, what is an eviction record? An eviction record is very simply created. I will simply, as a landlord, walk into court and file a claim against Paul. He didn't pay rent. The record is made. That record is permanent and public for Paul's entire life and afterlife, before May 5th. That was our process, and the issue was, even if Paul won the case, even if Paul got the case dismissed, even if Paul ultimately left and had an agreement, that record was permanent and public, that Paul didn't pay rent.
Right.
And so what this process allows for is someone like Paul to go online and petition, which is simply ask the courts to seal the record. And there's certain records have certain timelines. So if you won your case, or if it was dismissed, you're allowed to go ahead and petition right after the appeal period and just, hey, court, I'd like to seal this. I won, I moved on. Or in some cases, if you paid back the money you owed, you can do that right away. If you didn't pay any rent and you still owe the money, so don't forget, you could still be held in debt and you can still have that hurting you in your terms of your credit. But the eviction itself, you have to wait 4 years. And in those 4 years, you cannot have committed another eviction. You can't have been evicted again. And then you can petition the court and ask for that. Now, for more serious components, people who've done horrible property damage, I know of people who've verbally, physically harassed their landlords or other tenants and eventually got kicked out. It's a 7-year wait. And it's a 7-year wait that requires you to, again, have had no evictions in that time for you to seal. And each one of those cases, the landlord is notified. They can oppose it. They can write their own response and say, no, you shouldn't do this. And then the court or the clerk magistrate will make the decision.
Are you hearing anything from either tenants or landlords in Winthrop, or even for that matter anywhere else in your district, who are saying this is great, or this is really going to be a problem for me to continue to rent to
I've heard from both sides.
Yeah.
I just remind them of the coalition that it took to build this. It wasn't just a bunch of tenants and myself or legal service attorneys. The Greater Boston Real Estate Board and the Mass Realtors Association helped to write this bill and fully endorsed it because we wanted the balanced view. That's why the timelines are where they are. That's why the landlords are being notified. The AFL-CIO fully endorsed this bill, and the district attorney endorsed this bill, but also a special community in the recovery community, North Suffolk Community Services, those in many cases who were suffering through addiction and as a result got evicted for doing some horrible things, because that's what the disease makes you do. Part of their steps in moving on is sealing this record and not getting evicted again. So you have to think about, I think, the bigger message, which is, do we or don't we believe in a second chance? And we've already answered that in Massachusetts. We firmly believe in a second chance because we allow you to seal your felony conviction. You're allowed to seal your criminal misdemeanor record. So you can seal when you're convicted, but you can't seal when you're evicted. It didn't seem to make sense.
Yeah. I'd like to ask you about budget situations, because
Sure.
obviously in this country we're seeing a lot of concern about whether we're headed into a recession. There's a lot of ambiguity about, or at least concern about federal and state funding. Just first of all, in the 3A, this relates to a 3A part of one of the main punishments, if you will, of 3A or compliance mechanisms is the potential for a town like Winthrop to lose its state funding. Can you give us any update on where that stands in terms of any additional clarity on what Winthrop actually stands to lose because of that and how important that is right now given the need for state funding?
Well, I will say one of the things that really was disappointing was linking 3A funding to public safety grants or to fire grants. And I believe that that's no longer part of the conversation, I hope. I do know that that may still come about, but I was a firm advocate that the two conversations should be completely separate. Whether a town is or isn't compliant with 3A should have nothing to do with whether their fire department gets the safety equipment it needs. I just didn't like that at all.
Well, is there anything that should be cut off then? I mean, pretty much everything a town needs, it needs. So if that's a mechanism.
I think you can say there's a difference between funds for a fire and, let's say, funds for additional potholes.
Okay. Okay.
I think you can say that. Now, yes, of course we need them, but one is going to save somebody's life,
Right.
either the public safety worker, the first responder, or the person who's in the house.
Yeah.
So I don't think we can claim the same level of need.
Right.
And I don't think we should be linking all state funding to 3A.
Yeah.
Now, that being said, yes, we're at risk for it, losing it. We could be at risk for losing all of our forms of some funding, or public housing, or ferry, or all of these different things, and that's really concerning.
So apart from 3A, what would you say is the general situation with state funding and the amount of state funding that can come to a town like Winthrop? Does it seem like that's sort of a steady state situation, or is it significantly up or down where you see it going?
I will say in the Senate budget, we've increased they call it the UGA funding, which is the local kind of general funds to cities and towns. We're very happy to have increased it by several percentage points. So really helping local cities and towns to have that money from the state.
Right, right. Just also on the economic situation, we're hearing talk that even small businesses are being affected by this tariff situation going on in Washington. Do you know of any local businesses, Winthrop or your district, where you're hearing that a small business, or any business for that matter, is seriously worried about this affecting their existence?
I have not heard about the specific tariffs on any particular businesses or products being produced here in the 3rd Suffolk. I have heard concerns about a dip in tourism in general. I think that's in the United States, but if you look at where a lot of our funding does come from downtown, is the tourists who are coming into Boston. And I've certainly heard more concern about the outright just ways in which federal grants are just cut off for state agencies. There was a discussion about whether we're cutting federal grants off for Narcan expansion. Right. We're cutting federal grants off for fair housing.
Veterans, I think, is a big one.
And for veteran services. So those are often used by local municipalities, whether they have the Veteran Service Office, whether they have a housing office. So it's a trickle down of just being cut off from federal funds. And the state can't necessarily backfill everything.
Yeah. Well, sort of one thing I'm wondering is this, sometimes it's hard to know whether something is a big talking point in Washington that doesn't sort of affect our lives, or whether you're really seeing any of these kinds of things. I mean, another thing that occurs to me is higher ed. There's obviously a defunding of Harvard and other ones. Is that sort of Harvard's problem, or whatever other university's problem, or somebody else's thing, or are there real ways that we're seeing that show up in our lives here in town that you can see?
I think it's everyone's problem when federal government can say, I don't like what you're teaching, and therefore I'm going to cut you off of grants and funds. That's everyone's problem. Yeah. Because it's just, and if you allow it to happen for one side of the political spectrum, then you are essentially allowing it to happen for the other side. So if it's now conservative government basically saying we're going to cut off Harvard, then it could easily be a more liberal or progressive government cutting off Christian colleges and universities. Do you see, it's either good for the goose, then it must be good for the gander. I have a problem with it because I don't believe that Washington and federal government should be saying what you can and cannot teach, what children can and cannot learn. but especially what you can and cannot research. I mean, a lot of the money that's being cut off is for great research that is to help us with cancer, that's to help us with environmental programs. It's supposed to help us in so many different ways. And these institutes of higher learning, that's their wheelhouse. That's something we should be supporting.
Yeah. Big issue is the ferry. You've been a big part of that. So if people don't know, hopefully they know that the ferry now is running from Winthrop directly into Boston as opposed to going all the way to Quincy and back with a stop at Logan. First of all, how's that going so far?
Well, we launched April 28th, and considering when I first came in, where we come from, I think we've come a long way, and I think it's going very well. I think when I got elected and I came to Winthrop was paying about $100,000 a year to try and manage its own boat system with Quincy, and it was hard to manage. It was the schedule wasn't really conducive to commuters. Since then, we added a stop at Logan, and since then we added we actually got a boat so that Winthrop now is separate from Quincy, and now we have direct service that goes from Winthrop to downtown in 20 minutes.
Right.
And that's, to me, a huge win. Now we're still pushing for more, looking at year-round service, and also we're looking to, of course, always lower the ferry price. I think that's the major hindrance for a lot of people, is that it's $6.50 each way.
Yeah.
And that's a problem. It's
which is like triple the regular MBTA fare.
It's close to that, yes.
Yeah.
Now I do think we need to do better at promoting low-income fares, which cuts all travel in half, and we need to promote that and have the applications available at the ferry stop. There's that nice little building there. We also need to look at making sure that people have access to Zone 1 commuter rail passes, the little paper tickets. You can get them either at the machines and kiosks downtown, where they'll print them out, or through the mail. They do you pay for the month. It'll say Zone 1 and the month and the year. You show that on the ferry. You can also use the same ticket to get on the T, and you can use the same ticket to get on a bus. What we really want is a Charlie card, I know, and we're going to have to work on that. But for how far we've come in 3 years,
Yeah.
I'm very excited.
So yeah, we got rid of the stop in Quincy, but we had the stop at Logan, which obviously doesn't take nearly as long as going to Quincy. But is that stop productive? I want to ask.
It is productive if you were traveling. So let's be clear. The schedule is set up for commuters.
Yeah.
So in the morning, you go from Winthrop to Boston in 20 minutes. In the afternoon, you're coming from Boston to Winthrop in 20 minutes, 20 to 30 minutes. That is how the schedule is set up. Logan is on the back end of the morning commute. And if you're leaving in the afternoon from Winthrop, you're going to go first to Logan and then to downtown. So it's still providing airport access, and there are a lot of people actually who are happy because they work at Massport and they work there from Winthrop. So that's one access point that they have. And so it is, the point of the stop is put in a position not to get in the way of commuters, but to still allow for the stop to happen.
Yeah, no, I'm getting at though is if it's designed to be a service from Logan to Boston, is it really working that way? And is it really an option for people in Winthrop who are going to the airport to use that? Just because the schedule feels a bit random, I suppose.
Yeah, I think that's fair. I think that's a fair comment, and I think honestly, please send in more.
Yeah.
Look, this is the first time we've had this service this way,
Yeah.
and there's going to be ways in which it changes. I hope that we end up with like a year-round service. I hope we end up with a local ferry economy where there's small businesses there who are selling all sorts of products in the morning, coffee, so on and so forth,
Right.
lunch, whatever. I'm hoping that we end up with a weekend service that is robust because so many people want to come to Winthrop in the summertime from downtown.
Right.
I'm hoping that when we get, and I'm proud to announce I'll be getting us an earmark to the town of Winthrop for a ferry shuttle, that people will find it easier to get to the ferry who live in Winthrop, but also people who come to Winthrop for the day can go to the beach easily, can go to downtown and eat at any one of our wonderful restaurants that we're trying to support local businesses. And then ultimately they can get back on the ferry as it's going to go around the town, and they can go home. And they don't come here with cars, especially on 4th of July weekend.
Right. So how big is there's some talk of like comparing Winthrop to potentially Provincetown in terms of a tourist destination. Does that seem realistic? Do we want that, or
I don't know if Winthrop is comparable at all. I mean, it's such a unique place. But I will say, for someone who maybe lives downtown in the seaport, if you want to hear, come to the beach. This is probably the closest beach that you'll have, and it's the closest cape you'll have. And just to be able to come here on now a $6 ferry to get on the little shuttle bus that we'll hopefully have moving around for you to enjoy yourself, have a great time, and then go home for the day. I think this is a wonderful localized economy that we really want.
Right. One of the big news for you is you're now the chair of the Joint Committee on the Judiciary.
Yeah.
So tell us why is that important, and what will that mean for us in Winthrop?
Well, I will say this: it's a whole other world, and it's the largest committee, and it's the one that's really about what new laws, what new crimes, what new punishments we're creating. We deal with immigration. We deal with the courts themselves, the expansion of the courts, the judges' salaries in the courts. We deal with estate planning, wills, trusts. We deal with, today we were dealing with forfeiture and issues of the people who have their property taken by local police and what to do with that money. We also had an excellent hearing on this new, oh goodness Lord, it's this new, not opioid, but it's this new, they're trying to ban it.
A new kind of synthetic drug you're talking about?
Yes, they're trying to ban it. I'm going to forget the name,
Seems like there's new ones all the time, right?
Right, but this one, there was a real opposition to having it banned.
Okay.
They really want to see some regulation.
Who's the they?
The they were the associates. If I can take 2 seconds, I can find it for you.
Well, we can do that. I guess what I'd like to know though is there anything that somebody in Winthrop could say, oh, as a result of you being chair of Judiciary, is there an issue that maybe there's another way to ask it? What do you see as something you want to get out of having that chairmanship?
I think what you will find in me being in this chair, one, it's going to be very hard to be hyper local, right? Because this is about whether something should be a crime or not. So some people in Winthrop who agree that assisting someone and encouraging them to commit suicide, which is what somebody came there and asked for it to be a new crime, punishable by 5 years, they may find that speaks to them because God forbid something happened to their child. I want to say though, and give a shout out to Jeff Turco. He came today and gave one of the best speeches I've ever heard. It was emotional, it was impactful. He got teary-eyed, he talked about his family. And the question was, what's the real level of punishment that we should be giving to drug dealers who intentionally deal drugs that result in people's deaths? Right now, you cannot prosecute them for murder. And the question for him is, why not? And he brought up his family members. And there are a lot of people, I can assure you, in Winthrop, Revere, and East Boston, and Boston, who have the same question. Right. Now, I have promised people that because of the kinds of bills that are before me, they're all controversial. Whether to get rid of life without parole, it's all controversial. I don't co-sign onto the bills. I don't like to say yes or no or where I stand on them. Right. What is, I think, good about having me in this position is I'm advertising and saying, these bills are coming up on these topics. Please come, voice yourselves, meet with me, tell me why I should or shouldn't do this. I meet with law enforcement a lot more than I ever did before, the DA's office a lot more than I ever did before. So I think I have a different mind about safety and also civil liberties, dealing with guns, all of those different things that I didn't before. And I know that those are two big issues in Winthrop, is safety and civil liberties.
So I understand that's common for chairs to not to get in the weeds on some of these issues and to sort of let the process play out. But is there anything you can say that you sort of look at now and you say that in the realm of the judiciary that feels to you that needs to be changed?
I have to say this, I didn't even know it was an issue. but we had a hearing on estate planning and divorce. And this woman came in and talked about, a whole coalition came in and talked about what to do with the pets and pet custody.
Right.
And at first, when I read the whole thing, I was like, oh, come on. But then the testimony that came out and how some people were staying in relationships, abusive relationships, in order to protect their pets, or that's how people were manipulating their partners and abusing the pet to get to them. And it was really a great conversation that I really want to get involved in, to figure out what do you look at to determine who gets custody. Right. And it sounds small. I would never have heard about this issue but for being chair of judiciary. I would have, and then when I brought it up to a couple friends, they went through it. They just went through horrible breakups. They just went through divorces, and that was one of the sticking points in the divorce. And I didn't realize that.
Yeah, yeah. Well, Senator, we're almost out of time, but is there anything else that maybe you could briefly tell us that's sort of on your radar on Beacon Hill that the people in town should, be alert to? The budget, of course.
Well, the budget, yes. And I want to say that, we've been blessed with a good income level, at least for this quarter, to help us fund the budget, but also to fund the millionaire's tax is working very well to help us fund education and fund transportation. I think ultimately, if there's anything I would want folks to hear from me, it's that we're working extremely hard. I know that there was some questions about transparency and what we're doing and how we're doing it. And there's the issues of the audit. I will say this, I don't know too many people on an individual basis who is elected who is more transparent than I. I'll go back and forth with people online about policies, and they agree with me, they disagree with me, and I'm responding. So you're not confused about where I stand. I'm fine. I'm already on record in the Globe saying I don't care if the open meeting law were to apply to me or my colleagues. It applied to me when I was a Boston City Councilor. People regularly FOIA'd my emails. I was fine with it then. It was applied to me when I worked for the City of Boston. I was fine with it then. So I am not opposed to people having access to, my government calendar, email, so on and so forth. I will say that in the name of transparency, I want to know what you're looking for. So simply saying I want to be able to audit you.
You're referring to the state auditor.
I am. Simply saying I have the power to audit the legislature. I have, I think, a rightful response to say what are your left and right limits of that audit. Yeah. Because while her heart may be great, her vision might be fine, it is not about her. It's about the auditor that comes after her, who may not be as ethical, and so on and so forth. The left and right limits that we set now are supposed to outlast all of our political careers. And I want to be very clear, it's, again, not about her. And it's too bad when we did have a hearing for her to come and explain the left and right limits and her vision, and for her to bring in supporters and constitutional scholars. She skipped it. And I don't know if it's that she had her own motives to hide, or if she ultimately couldn't defend herself.
So we had the state auditor on, and she talked about some of that. So I we just refer people to so that she has a chance to. We have an episode on that's worth looking at. Maybe just briefly, is there anything you could point out that would be reasonably outside the limits of what you would think the public has a right to see what is going on at the legislature? What would be an example of something?
I gave a perfect example, which was personal details of other people's lives. I get people email me their Social Security, their unemployment, their concerns, what happened in their sometimes abuse, sexual assault. I get I can't pay rent. I get all sorts of things, and so. I think other constituent personal lives and matters and questions should be off limits to the just general public. But anything I say to and from the state agencies, come get it. I
hear you. Well, Senator Lydia Edwards, thank you very much for your time today.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Welcome.